everybody. Today I've made a short video to introduce you to the magical world of plant cells. Your goal is to watch the video while filling out the chart you were provided with in class today. Throughout the video, I will be introducing the organelles of the plant cell and describing their roles within the cell. All you need to do is sit back, relax, and pay attention. Also, record the roles of each organelle when they are shown on your chart. Over the next few days, we will be exploring all the different types of cells you might encounter in your lifetime, and possibly some you won't encounter. Plant cells are some of the most extraordinary cells that exist. I say this because unlike our underperforming animal cells, they can create their own food and hold themselves upright. This is why we don't need to feed our plants cheeseburgers every day to keep them alive. They can make their own food. That's pretty cool. The plant cell has many organelles inside of it that all work together to function as one well-oiled machine. Well, sort of. First off, the cell membrane is a thin layer made up of proteins, lipids, and fats. It forms a protective wall around the organelles contained within the cell. It is selectively permeable, which means it can choose what goes through it, and thus regulates the transportation of materials needed for the survival of the organelles inside the cell. Cell membrane is found right here. We're going to learn the difference between plant and animal cells in a couple of days, and this is one where it can get kind of confusing. So the cell membrane is inside of the cell wall, which is right here around the outside. So it's this inner membrane that goes around all of the organelles inside the cell with the cell wall outside of it. So this is what the cell wall the cell membrane might look like blown up. So looking at it up close, we have all of these phospholipids right here and these big proteins, which we'll talk about later on in more detail. Basically, it's this protective layer between the inside of the cell and the outside environment. It protects the cell and controls what enters and exits the cells. These phospholipids work to keep everything on the right side of the membrane, and these proteins are what pick and choose what comes across. So for instance, this protein might allow these green circles to come across the cell membrane. When that happens, these green circles will go through this protein and over to the other side of the membrane. Next up, we have the cell wall. This is unique to plant cells. The cell wall is a fairly rigid, protective wall that resists the strain of physical forces. The cell wall is mainly made up of cellulose fiber, and it helps maintain the shape of the cell. So the cell wall is this bad boy all the way around the outside. The most important thing that the cell wall does is it keeps the cell strong. So it can resist forces and keeps the cell from bending or collapsing. If we didn't have this cell wall to hold our cells upright, we would basically get a mushy lump of cells, sort of like an animal cell or a blob of animal cells. This is what helps our plants grow tall and strong. Next up is the nucleus. This is a spherical body that contains various organelles and surrounded by a nuclear membrane. The nucleus is known to be the control center of the cell. It regulates various cell functions by controlling the protein synthesis of the plant cell. The nucleus contains DNA within the chromosomes. Basically, the nucleus controls what is being made and what happens when, because the DNA is giving it directions to do so. So our nucleus is found right here. Usually it's pretty spherical in shape, and that's how you can tell what it is. It is known as the control center of the cell, and this is because it contains the genetic information, which is our DNA, the directions for everything. The nucleus is in control of everything that happens within the cell. The nucleus is surrounded by a nuclear envelope. This is kind of like the cell membrane, except around the nucleus. All you really need to know about the nuclear envelope is that it holds our genetic material inside the nucleus. Next are ribosomes. These are small packets or granules of RNA that convert amino acids into proteins. Basically, they're these little itty bitty tiny little dots all over the place here. They're very, very small, and what they do is build proteins. Remember, proteins do everything. So here's our ribosome at work right here. This is our ribosome, these two parts put together. That's our RNA coming in and building this protein right here. So this is actually how it happens within the ribosome. Next, our endoplasmic reticulum. This packages and transports proteins and lipids. It's a series of tubes for supplies to travel through. There are two different kinds of endoplasmic reticulum. The first is the smooth ER. This produces lipids, and the rough ER, which produces proteins, and then both of these transport the lipids and proteins to where they need to be. Next, our mitochondria. These are known to be the powerhouse or the storehouse of energy of the cell. The mitochondria plays an important role in the cell by converting sugar into ATP. ATP stores and releases energy required for the cell to function, is responsible for almost every reaction within the cell. Basically, your mitochondria is creating energy for the cell to use in every process that it does. Next, the chloroplasts. These are found only in plant cells. The chloroplasts are organelles that resemble the structure of the mitochondria a little bit. It basically is a plastid that traps energy from sunlight. It contains chlorophyll molecules that carry on the process of photosynthesis, as well as give the plants a green color. So these chloroplasts here collect sunlight and creates food for the plant cells. This is the big reason why plant cells are so cool compared to animal cells. They collect this sunlight and make food out of it, just like the Swedish chef. I don't know if you guys are old enough to recognize this guy here, but he's a crazy guy that makes food out of everything. So just like our plant cells use sunlight to make food, the Swedish chef does that too. Okay, next is the Golgi apparatus. This one's pretty basic. It's also known as the Golgi complex or the Golgi body. It is a stack of membrane-bound structures that is involved in the transportation of lipids and modification of proteins. It's very, very similar to the ER, but its main job is to package and send the supplies out. Next, lysosomes. This one's one of my favorite. This one, all it does is digests unwanted materials and breaks down the cell after death. So all of these little blobs right here will take in any unwanted materials and break it down, just like my man, the Hulk here. Last but not least, we have the vacuole. This is mainly used for storage. Inside the plant cell, there's usually one very, very large vacuole. This helps to support the plant cell by holding the pressure inside the cell. So if we didn't have this vacuole, there would be all this empty space and it wouldn't be able to stay supported from the inside. Essentially, it's for storage most of the time. It also isolates harmful materials inside the cell and gets rid of unwanted materials from the cell if need be. That's that guy. All right, be sure to go back to any part of the video if there's something you don't understand. Please bring your completed worksheet with you to our next class so we can start our class projects. Yay!